Hey, good afternoon. My name is Rob, and I am that developer dad. It is Tuesday, July 23rd, and we are continuing work on moving this thing from being a simple little console app that only runs when I'm at home and can connect to the laptop that's running my AI modules and stuff like that, to thinking about maybe putting this thing available wherever I am, and maybe even making it available to other people for a price, of course, because running all of this stuff in the cloud costs money, and I am not independently wealthy. So if I do release this as a product, I do need to think about accepting people's money for it. And if I'm going to be accepting people's money for this thing, I better make sure it's good. So we've got some work ahead of us if we're going to do that. And while I haven't fully decided if I'm going to release this thing as a product yet, I think it's worthwhile pretending that I'm going to, just so that we can talk about all of the additional stuff that goes into doing that, even just beyond the adding the cool features and making some neat stuff happen with code. There's a ton of other stuff that frankly can get a little boring. It can be incredibly frustrating, and it's even quite a bit of things that I'm not used to doing, because I've always had the privilege of having people like teams of QA testers and test designers. I've had access to deployment engineers, people that are really good at automating, taking a chunk of code and pushing it up to the web or the cloud or wherever it's going to run, and making sure that everything continues to run smoothly. And we're going to have to dive into that stuff. And I am one person, and I don't have those competencies. So eventually we're going to get into some stuff that I have no idea what I am doing with. And we're going to learn together. So what I've been doing since this morning, and I'll share my screen, is just kind of organizing my thoughts. We kind of listed out a lot of the things that we still need to do, and I color-coded the things to take on first as in this dark, angry orange color. And then we've got sort of this lighter orange of next steps. Once the higher priority things are done, I'm actually going to deprioritize my security checks for the time being. Not that they're not important, but they are something I am not equipped to deal with yet. So we're going to push those back to salmon. And then we've also got code quality checks in here too. So we might want to, we're going to talk about that one soon, but I've got things grouped into automated testing, and some of these are, hey, Shave Maddox, how's it going, man? Shane's a buddy of mine that I know through the Frog Pants Network, and he's a good dude, and I believe is also a fellow programmer, but he works primarily in the Java world, and I live in the dotNet world. But Shane's a good egg and a smart guy. So automated testing is definitely something I want to get put in place. Not just because it's going to help me turn this thing into a product, but also because it gives me some automatic sanity checks. Now, before we do any test automation, we need to make sure that our tests are complete enough to give us an idea of whether or not we're doing the right stuff. After we've got some automated testing in place, we're going to throw a user interface in front of this thing, and we're going to have to tackle the storage problem of, as we generate these characters, where do we put them? And I was originally thinking I'd just dump them off to the file system as like text files with JSON and some text and stuff like that in it. But I think if I'm actually going to consider turning this thing into a product, I should probably use a structured data store. And since I'm targeting Azure, and Azure has a free small SQL instance, I'm probably going to target SQL Server for that. If I were going to be just running on my own hardware or in a virtual machine or something like that, I'd probably consider something like Postgres SQL because it's open source and free. But the Postgres service on Azure and most of the existing cloud providers doesn't have a free tier, and I need free. So after I identify the highest priority items, I've also got monitoring over here. We need to add some logging and some other performance metrics and stuff like that, timing of calls and measuring token usage coming out of the LLM and so on. Those are all things that we're going to need to address during this ramp up towards making this thing into an actual product. For the short term, we want to talk about automated testing, and we've got missing unit tests. I'm going to add those offline because I've already done a bunch of unit testing in this stream series, and I don't need to bore you with me typing in more X unit tests and stuff like that. Contract tests are something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. Now, once we've got a few contract tests in place, I'm going to bounce over to automating those tests. And we're going to talk about Git hooks as a way to automate some of these tests for us. And then once we've got those things stood up and the contract tests are at a place where they're good enough for now, we're going to talk about the user interface and storage. So we are eventually going to need something other than a console app. And if we want to store user info along with the NPCs they create, we'll need a database. For now, some flavor of Microsoft SQL is the top candidate, but I'm open to other ideas. We'll need relational capabilities for sure. We might find non-relational DB useful for some other use cases. All right, so I need to save this as game tools, next step planning. Let's talk about contract tests. So we have our components, and let me load up a diagram of what our application components look like from a high level. Here we go. So let's make this a lot bigger. Excuse me. We've got our client layer. That's going to, right now it's a console app. It'll eventually be some kind of web-based application. Inside there, we've got our API/workload provider. That's our task-based API that the client's going to be calling into. We've got our townsfolk manager that delegates the work off to components that live in the dice bag engine, the rule set access, and eventually the NPC access. And then, of course, we've got our AI workload manager that accepts prompts and grounding data, wraps those or prompt templates with the grounding data, turns those into a text prompt, and sends those off to a large language model via the LLM access component. It's these two components, the workload provider and the townsfolk manager, that would be best served with contract testing. We don't necessarily want to test the inner code in those components, but what we do want to do is we want to make sure that when I invoke a task on my workload provider, that it calls the townsfolk manager to generate the NPC and gets something back. And then if the user says yes, it calls off to the AI workload manager to get the AI description, and it handles the response from that. So that's what I'd call the happy path. Basically, the execution when everything works properly. If I call this thing, say yes, randomly generate everything, yes, give me a AI description, I'll eventually get back all of that stuff. But a big part of contract testing is having an understanding of what this component should do when, say, the townsfolk manager doesn't do what it's supposed to do correctly. Or if something bad happens while trying to execute the AI workload, how does that affect the overall process? How is that information shown to the client? Is it sent back in an appropriate way? Does it just crash everything and delete their information, or what? These are the details that we need to kind of flesh out and determine what happens when, and then we can write our tests to make sure that the code inside those contracts or inside those components is behaving appropriately. And for that, we're going to use a technique called behavior-driven development. And we're also going to introduce mocking, which is where we would create sort of a fake version of the components that our contract under test would be calling into. And by creating that faked version, we can kind of say, all right, well, here let's simulate an error, or here let's simulate success. And we don't actually call the real dependency components. We just call a version of them where we can simulate different behaviors of the calls that are made. So let's go into our Solution Explorer, and we can close down the console client. We've already got our game tools, dice engine tests. I'll be expanding that fairly, like I'll do that stuff offline because it's just writing more unit tests over the new behaviors we added. Now, oh gosh darn it. There we go. So our townsfolk manager tests, let's get rid of those. Let's just remove. Goodbye. Like, let's go so far as to pop out to our file explorer, and we'll go into the tests folder. Townsfolk manager tests. Goodbye. See you later. All right. Another thing I got to do right now is I need to put these changes on the shelf, or stash them. So these guys, open file as default action. Nope. I want to stash these changes. Where is that? Stage? No. I think I actually have to go out to a command line. So let's open. Do we have open terminal? Yeah, we do. Here we go. Here's my terminal. Oh, it's PowerShell. Ew. That's fine. Okay, there's all the stuff. Get status. And it's thinking, oh, get's not recognized. I don't want PowerShell. How about just the developer command prompt? Do I have get on the command line here? Get status. Nope, I don't. Stinky. Let's close that. Matter of fact, let's just get rid of that and see if Git will let me stash here. Fetch, pull, committer, stash. It's probably right here. And I want to stash all, include untracked, save. Okay, those are stashed. Before we start doing this, I'm going to come out to main, and I'm going to create a new branch. And feature / add contract tests. Here we go. And let's apply all as unstaged. There we go. And we can drop that stash. Goodbye. Yep. See you later. Good, good, good. So now we'll come back to Solution Explorer. Let's do a quick build. And my deaf cat is making a bunch of noise because she's probably hungry. And she has no idea what she sounds like when she complains like that. I'm sure eventually she's going to hop up on my desk and do a code review. I call that getting a CAT scan. All right, and rebuild all succeeded. Good. So let's add some tests. Add new project. And I don't want to add a class library. I'm going to see if I've got a SpecFlow. Here we go. We're going to add a SpecFlow project. And I'm going to call it game tools dot townsfolk manager dot tests. And it's not going in source, it's going in tests. There we go. Project will be created in here. This directory is not empty. That's fine. I don't want it to be. Will this make it freak out? Create. And we're going to use which framework? Does it really only use .NET 6? Ew. Test framework. XUnit. I can't believe it doesn't want to use .NET 8. That's so weird. I think before we go much further here, I better do a Google. New window. SpecFlow project with .NET 8. Bindings cannot be discovered in .NET 8 application. That's from last year. Select .NET 6, right-click project, change the framework to .NET 8. This is all that stuff. Yeah. Let's see. We'll FAFO this. XUnit, do it. Okay. What's all this shit? Pardon my language. Get your personalized learning material. Go away. Get lost. Where's the properties? Let's go to the project properties. Target framework .NET 6, absolutely not. .NET 8. Target OS, whatever, assembly name, all that stuff. Let's save it, and I'm going to try to build this solution or build this project right now, just to make sure it isn't flipping out or going to do anything dumb to me. I think the last time I tried to use SpecFlow, 8 wasn't out yet, and I don't target odd-numbered framework versions. Away. Build started. Is it still trying to build? No, I don't think so. Oh yeah, it is. All right, so we've got drivers, features, step definitions, support, implicit usings. Oh, here it goes. And it says it succeeded. So drivers, we can get rid of that. We don't need it. Goodbye. Support, I'm going to leave it there just in case we need it later. I want to open this up. Implicit usings, no. Disable. Save that. MS Test SDK, Living Doc plugin, all that stuff. Fluent assertions, all right. Item group, yada yada. Good. Our Townsfolk Manager tests has a dependency on the Townsfolk Manager project. Okay. It's also got a dependency on the dice engine, and even though it definitely has a dependency on the rule set access. Does it have a dependency on anything else? Probably definitions and my framework classes, maybe. So we need to give the same dependencies on our test project as we do to the actual implementation project. Now let's take a look at what these things look like. So SpecFlow, when it sets up a new project, kindly creates samples for us. Project bindings cannot be discovered, navigation, completion, and other features are disabled. What are you talking about? Will it run? I don't think it will. Simple calculator for adding two numbers, blah, blah, blah. Can I run it? Will it run? Go to definition. We should have these over here. All right, when the two numbers are added, here's our binding. Navigation, step completion, and other features are disabled. That's a little bit disturbing. But let's see if we can make it work. Link to a feature, yeah. Now, we can run. Annotation is that stuff, outlining Git. Let's try to find steps. All steps have been defined for this file already. So let's build our solution. Yeah, whatever. Let's open our Test Explorer. We'll pull this up here. So here's this calculator feature. Add two numbers. Let's try running these. Run. And they're all going to fail. Test run finished. Nothing passed, everything failed. Add two numbers. Why did it fail? Well, because we ran into a XUnit pending step execution error. That's basically the unit test equivalent of throw new not implemented exception. So good, our tests run. So we can actually delete our step definitions. Goodbye, we don't need them. And we can also delete our calculator feature. Goodbye. So what do we want to do is we want to add a new feature file. And SpecFlow, we'll come over here, feature file for SpecFlow, and Townsfolk Manager. And it would be good if I could spell it right. Townsfolk Manager.feature. And I don't like that because we're going to end up with a whole bunch of test methods that are or are not necessarily directly related to each other. So what I like to do, rather than create a feature file for each class or component when I'm doing behavior-driven development, is I will add a new folder, Townsfolk Manager. And in here, what I'm going to do, oh, here comes the kitty. Let's crack open the interface that defines an iTownsfolk manager. And we're gonna create a feature file for each of these public methods. So let's add a new item. It's going to be a feature file. Hack. And let's say GetNpcOptions is a feature. And I believe that's what I called the method. Let's make sure it's all case correct. Rename. Get NPC options. Good. And rather than drive myself crazy with all of these things and flipping back and forth, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this file. I'm going to copy the contents of it, open up an Apple Note, just create a new one, hit paste, and pull that over here. Excuse me. So that I can keep track of what's been created or which files I've done so far and which ones I have not. So let's add another new item. It's going to be another feature. Generate townsperson. Yep. And I've got two overloads of this. One of them has no parameters. The other one has a selected attributes parameter. But we're going to do both in the same file. So I can delete those. Let's add another one. Let's say save townsperson. Add a new item. Load townsperson. Add a new item. List townspersons. Okay. Now these guys are special cases because list, load, and save aren't even implemented over on my manager class yet. I'm just creating these as placeholders. And there is a way in SpecFlow disable feature. With warning. Disable one feature file from running in parallel with others. I don't want to do that. I want to ignore a feature file in SpecFlow. Tag the feature or scenario with the ignore tag. That's what we're going to do. So for now, on these guys, at ignore, I better refresh my memory. SpecFlow tag syntax. It has been more than a year since I've worked with SpecFlow. Assigning a tag to a feature is equivalent to assigning the tag to all scenarios in the feature file. If supported by the unit test framework, SpecFlow generates categories from the tags. Let's come in here and just very quickly. Does not support categories. You can still use tags to implement special logic for things like bindings. Yeah. Scenario, rule, and feature level tags. Descriptions. Rules. Edge case. SpecFlow. Multiple tags. Adding multiple tags in one feature file. Here we go. And yeah, it's just space separated. Thank you for the review. Good. So I'm going to grab this tag. Copy. Add it on load townsperson. Oop, I didn't want the start menu. Add it to save townsperson. Save. So, what does GetNpcOptions do? loads the list of selectable character options from the rule set access component. Loads and returns the, let's get rid of list of, selectable character options from the rule set access component. Save. So let's take a look at what this method actually looks like. Not the definition, the implementation. We should probably, while we're at it, here we go. Retrieves the dictionary of options, a keyed dictionary of character generation options, where the key contains the name of the templates, the category of the templates, and the value is a list of the template names. Great. So, what I want to do is open up Edge. I'm going to get a new window. We're going to go to Copilot. And not here, but over here. Copy. Given the following method implementation in C#, please generate a set of SpecFlow scenarios to test this method. I need scenarios that exercise both the happy path and the unhappy path. In my coding standard, variables with start with an underscore are module level variables or dependencies. So we need to ensure that the method will behave itself, will behave acceptably regardless of the state of those component level vars. Boom. And let's see what it builds me. All right. So good stuff. Can you redo that in C# pseudocode for me? Perhaps even just as C# comments. All right. So let's copy this. That's a decent set of test scenarios, I think. And we'll come over to our GetNpcOptions feature. I'm just going to paste those in here. And I don't remember commenting in SpecFlow. Golly. SpecFlow feature file comments. They're pseudo C#. Ah, uses a sharp sign. So what I'm going to do is Control H. We're going to replace all instances of a double / with that. That's a bit better. So tag happy path. Control given. And let's copy this. And I can get rid of that. Happy path scenario, retrieving NPC options successfully. Given the rule set access is properly configured, when I call GetNpcOptions, I should receive a populated dictionary of species, background, and vocation. And then I can delete that comment. Boop. And at unhappy path scenario, unhappy path rule set access is not configured. Given rule set access is not properly configured when I call GetNpcOptions, then I should receive an empty dictionary I'm not sure I like that. But I don't want to throw an exception. Not sure I like this behavior. If rule set, hey, there's the cat. There's the cat's ass. If rule set access is null, we should crash. We have a failure mode. That's a better way of saying it. I don't necessarily want to crash, but we're definitely in some sort of fail state. And then at unhappy path scenario, boop. Empty species, background, or vocation rules. Well, not every rule set is going to have those. Well, no, they are. They're just going to be named differently. Empty lists of character options in the dictionary. There we go. So, given and I want to pop that in by a tab. Rule set access is configured, but the rule set is missing required template collections. When I call GetNpcOptions, I want to get rid of that comma. When I call NpcOptions, then I should receive a dictionary with empty arrays for the missing option sets. Again, this feels like a failure mode that should keep the app from starting. I'm going to have to think on those. But there's not really much sense in going through that whole thought experiment when I'm just trying to demo how to do behavior-driven testing or behavior-driven analysis. Now, SpecFlow is a really nice application or a nice extension to Visual Studio. Unfortunately, I haven't found an equivalent for VS Code, but I should be able to define my steps. All steps have been defined in this file already. Whatever. I need to save. No, stop. What even are you doing? GetNpcOptions. Save. Now, I need to. What are you doing? Can I define the steps? User notification, all steps have been. Project bindings cannot be discovered. Navigation step completion and other features are disabled. All right, if you cannot fix, blah, 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 .NET Core app launch. To install missing framework. It wants to use framework version 7. I don't want to do that. Are not found. 807 .NET Core app. GD admin framework. .NET Core app version 7. I feel like I need to do a little bit more looking at the project file. Project references include all this stuff. Net8, nullable, disable. There's all that stuff. Let's pin this. Dependencies. Frameworks, .NET Core app. Let's see the properties on this guy. 807, good. And what's that error message again? Let's pin this guy. Oop. All right. Following frameworks were found. What is all this nonsense? Could not be discovered. SpecFlow OSS if you cannot fix it. To install the missing framework. Why is it still only wanting to use .NET 7? SpecFlow VS DLL, connectors generic. I guess I need to install .NET 7? That's gross. Well, let's do this. Copy. Come out to Edge. Paste and go. I don't want .NET 9. This runtime has reached end of life. Yeah, I know. Run console apps, run desktop apps, run server apps. I just want the SDK, man. .NET 7. SDK, Windows, and we are on an x64. All right, F it. Let's just download this. This will only take a couple of minutes. I'm really shocked that SpecFlow doesn't run on .NET 8. SpecFlow on dotNet 8. SpecFlow has been forked and rebooted in a new name, Wreck and Roll. That's weird. All right. We are almost out of time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this troubleshot and figure it out. And we'll continue doing our contract testing tomorrow. And hopefully we'll get a couple of these simpler contract tests sorted out. I can show you what I mean by all of this stuff. I apologize that the tooling that I'm used to doesn't seem to work with the newer versions of dotNet, which is really weird because SpecFlow is like the top dog when it comes to this stuff. But I'll get it sorted. We'll carry on, implement some of these contract tests, and then we'll see about getting them to run automatically when we do things in Git. So until then, have yourselves a great evening. Drink water, eat good food, relax, do something other than code, and I will see you all tomorrow.